Hello, and welcome to another edition of Here are my 5 favorite photos that I posted this month. This time we're talking about the photos that I posted in May of 2023. So without further ado, let's get to it. So this month I did something a little bit outside of my comfort zone. I went to a friend of mine and I said, hey, I see that camera sitting on your shelf there. Would I be able to borrow it for the foreseeable future? And they said yes. And I borrowed it, and it wasn't a 35mm camera. It was actually a medium format camera. It was the Bronica SQ-AI. So for this video, I thought about just talking about the photos that I took on that camera, but I thought I would decide rather to lump them all together, all the medium format photos together, and just show you guys some of them and talk about what I learned and what I like about them. So first up, we have a photo of what's called the Paris style, which you can find in Prospect Park here in Brooklyn, where I live. Right off the bat, I mean, this looks way different than any other photo that I've ever posted on this channel or on my Instagram. First of all, it's square format, which I think is really cool. It's a 6x6. And just the level of detail and the lack of grain in this photo is incredible. And across the board when I'm shooting with the Bronica SQ-AI. All of these medium format photos, by the way, were taken on Kentmere Pan 100, which can account for the lack of grain that we're seeing in the photos. Up next, we see the boathouse. That's also in Prospect Park here in Brooklyn. This is a building that I've taken photos of in 35mm plenty of times as I've passed it, but it felt really great to capture it in medium format and for the photo to come out as looking as good as it does. Right here is a photo of a Cadillac that I pass by just about every time I'm going to my photo lab, which is exposure therapy here in Brooklyn. This Cadillac is sort of like it's like a staple for me. It's like I stop and take a photo of it every time I have to drop off a roll. I usually have 1 or 2 frames left in my camera around the roll, and I just stop and take a photo of this car. And it was the same thing with this. I was down to my last frame on this Kentmere Pan 100, and I decided to stop and take a photo of this car, and I think it looks great. So here we have 2 photos of some bridges. On the left, we have the Manhattan Bridge, which was actually the first photo that I took on this roll. I knew that it was something that I really wanted to capture, and the Bronica that I'm borrowing comes with a 50mm lens and an 80mm lens, which I still need to figure out the sort of conversion, but I know that the 50 is more so equivalent to like a 35mm lens, and the 80 is more equivalent to like a 50mm lens if you're shooting a 35mm film. And I just love how wide that 50mm can go, and I can capture all of this. I think that I maybe underexpose the photo of the Manhattan Bridge, which is on the left, but overall, I really, really enjoy this photo. And on the right, we have the Brooklyn Bridge, which, I don't really love the composition of this, but I think I was still kind of feeling it out. I actually had to take this photo twice because the first one, the shutter went off when I wasn't ready, and yeah, I learned my lesson there. And last but not least, with the medium format photos, we have a photo of my girlfriend Harley. We were out to dinner right by the Manhattan Bridge, and I saw it right behind her, and I told her to look off into the distance, and I was able to get the camera right where I needed it, and this might be one of my favorite photos I think I've ever taken. I think this is one that I'm going to cherish for a long time. I think I was shooting at around a 5.6, so that allowed me to get the shallow depth of field that I needed, and I nailed the focus. And focusing with the Bronica is pretty easy. I do have the pentaprism viewfinder that you can put on top of it, so that makes it a little bit easier when composing because everything isn't backwards. That it's definitely tricky. I'm gonna probably do a whole video about the Bronica and my experience using the Bronica in a later video, which is why I didn't want to spend too much time talking about these photos. All right, on to the main course. We're going to talk about some 35mm photos that I took and posted in May of 2023. Up first, we have a photo of a skyscraper. This photo was taken on Arista EDU Ultra 400 with the Nikon FG and a 28mm lens. So I mentioned in a previous video somewhere that it's a real struggle living in New York City, living surrounded by all these giant buildings, and often beautiful buildings, beautiful architecture. It's a real struggle not to point your camera directly up at it and take a photo. And sometimes I give in, and sometimes the results are amazing, and this is one of those times. This photo to me feels like it could be like a book cover for some like dystopian, semi-dystopian New York City-based novel, sort of like J.G. Ballard's High Rise or something like that. I think that the way the light is wrapping around and sort of enveloping the building while also keeping a lot of it in secret and in shadow is just beautiful. You have the whole camera left side of the building that's kind of all being lit up, and you've got these rows and rows of windows, and then the right side falls off into darkness, and you've got the white kind of puffy, mashed potato clouds up in the sky. And I actually am thankful that I had the buildings on either side of the frame, both on the camera left side and camera right side, kind of boxing in the central figure, the skyscraper right there. I think that adds a nice balance to it. Up next, we have some photos of some art supplies in a window. This photo was taken on Ilford HP5 Plus with a Minolta XG7 and a 50mm lens. So Harley and I went out for some coffee or breakfast or something like that, and we were walking by this little shop here. There was no one in it, but I just saw all these art supplies that were, piled up on this table, and I couldn't resist taking a photo of it. I love the way that the light was hitting it, and I love even more my sort of subconscious composition of it. If there's one thing I've said a million times on this channel and in this whole series of videos, it's how much I love triangles and how much triangles just sort of subconsciously seep into every single photo that I take. Even go back to the photo of the building. I mean, there are triangles everywhere. I don't really have much else to say about this photo other than I like the geometry of it, and I also just like the subject matter. It's very chaotic, but it's not overwhelming, and it's sort of it implies a certain narrative, a certain story, and that's something that I'm going to try to look out for in future photos. Up next, we have a classic photo of the Manhattan Bridge. This photo was taken on Ilford HP5 Plus with a Minolta XG7 and a 50mm lens. Okay, so I had a wild debate in my head while taking this photo. I mean, if you've ever been to this spot in Dumbo here in Brooklyn, you know that it's just crawling with influencers and photographers and people who are getting married or whatever. And all of these people are there for the sole purpose of getting a photo of this bridge in between these two buildings. It's a classic. You've seen it a million times. I'm going to do a whole montage of other people's photos of this bridge. So there's a part of me that sees this, and it's a very iconic image, and you sort of have that debate within yourself, like, am I going to be another one of those photographers that takes a picture of this same bridge in this same composition? I mean, we're at a point where this thing has been photographed from every single angle imaginable. So it's not like I'm going to bring something unique to the table. But I'll be damned if I wasn't standing there and I was looking up at this thing and something about the composition just compels you to raise your camera and fire the shutter. And I think I maybe have to get a little bit better about that in myself, in not allowing myself to not take a photo just because, for whatever dumb reason, like I need to be unique. I need to be some snowflake who takes photos of things that other people aren't taking photos of. It's okay to take photos of things that are widely photographed. They're probably widely photographed for a reason. And what ended up coming out was a photo that I'm actually really happy with. And at the end of the day, that's all that matters. Up next, we have another photo of Harley. This photo was taken on Ilford HP5 Plus with a Minolta XG7 and a 50mm lens. So you'll notice this is Harley sitting in the same position in the restaurant that we were sitting at in the medium format Bronica photo. I asked her to look down this time. You could see that she's a lot more serious in this photo, but the sun was just setting and it was just falling gracefully and perfectly onto her face that I had to get a photo on my 35mm camera. And once again, I think I was shooting at somewhere between a 5.6 and maybe even a 4. And we're getting that nice shallow depth of field. You can still see the bridge in the background. And yeah, not much to say about this. I just think it's a beautiful portrait of my beautiful girlfriend. And last but not least, we have a photo of some icicles in Ottawa, Canada. This photo was taken on Arista EDU Ultra 400 with a Nikon FG and a 50mm lens. Last month, I had an opportunity to work on a reality TV show that was sending me to a couple different places. I went to Tennessee, and then from Tennessee, we went to Canada. And wouldn't you know it, as soon as we land in Canada, it starts snowing, whatever the equivalent of like raining cats and dogs is. It was snowing cats and dogs outside. And my hotel room had this balcony, and I stepped out onto it, and I was watching the snow fall, and I look up and I see these icicles dangling from the balcony above. So naturally, I raise my camera and I take a photo. Now, it's not every day that I'm taking a photo that's rooted in pure geometry and abstraction. The things I tend to take photos of are people or very obvious objects, things that I see in the street, or things like bridges. There's a lot of bridge photos. And here I was in Canada while I was sort of doing research into fan ho for my fan ho video. And yeah, I think subconsciously a little bit of fan ho's sort of abstract approach to light and shadow kind of influenced me here a little bit. Again, we've got the sort of triangle thing going on, and we've also got this sort of frame within a frame where the icicles are sort of squeezed in between the balcony above and the building on the bottom right, right there in that white part, and there's just enough definition and there's just enough shadow where you can tell what exactly they are. The only thing I'm a little unhappy with is the amount of grain that ended up coming through in this photo. I'm not exactly sure why. I took this photo on the Nikon FG. You could watch my review of that camera and it'll, maybe explain why exactly that camera isn't my favorite to use, but I took it on this trip, and yeah, it was a little bit grainier than I would have liked. It could have also been me using Arista EDU Ultra 400. I do have a review of that coming out pretty soon, so be on the lookout for that. And there you have it. Those are my 5 favorite photos that I took in May of 2023 on 35mm, as well as a collection of some medium format photos that I took on the Bronica SQ-AI, and there will be a video about the Bronica coming out. But let me know what you thought about all my photos. This was a pretty successful month as opposed to last month's video where I was sort of not happy with anything that I was photographing. I gotta say that I think that shooting in black and white has that sort of effect on photographers. I fall in that camp. I definitely prefer shooting in black and white, and the reasons for which I prefer it are not so clear to me just yet, but you can bet your bottom dollar that I've got a video coming out about it after I collect my thoughts and write them down and really, dissect and dig into what it is about black and white photography that appeals over color photography. Be sure to check out my other videos from previous months about my top 5 favorite photos that I took that month. I think something that's interesting about this doing this series is that I'm going to be able to look back maybe a year from now and see how my favorite photos from January of 2023 might look different from my favorite photos from December of 2023, and so on and so forth. And for however long this channel is up and running, I'm sort of excited to see the progression of my photography and of my skill and of my interests, the things that I take photos of, and the sort of experimentations and deviations I take along the way. Shooting medium format with the Bronica SQ-AI was a total experiment that definitely paid off, and it kind of gave me the medium format bug. So I would also say be on the lookout for future videos about some more medium format stuff. I'm in the market for a camera, so let me know what medium format camera you think I should get. And yeah, that about does it. I'm going to leave this video off with some other photos that I took in May of 2023. And yeah, I'll see you all next time.